Right, I thought I would briefly talk about my Akai EWI Solo I've got here. Now, a brief bit of background as to why did I get it. Well, I'm getting that little bit older, so I thought I need some good brain exercise, so learn a musical instrument. And that coincided with me talking to a young jazz student I know who's up at the conservatoire doing a degree course, and he's an amazing saxophone player. And I just casually asked him what other instruments did he play, and he said this thing called an EWI. I'd never heard of these things before, so did a little bit of online investigation. Came up with this Akai EWI Solo, amongst other things, and this is actually the instrument he does play. However, when I was looking at this in general, I was thinking, okay, I'm a beginner, total beginner. I've got to be learning my scales and things. I think this could be a little bit over the top as a beginner. And in fact, one or two other YouTube videos rather implied the same thing, saying this was not the ideal beginner's instrument. So rather than going splashing out on a new one of these, I did actually go and buy myself a relatively cheap Roland Aerophone Mini just to have a little experiment with, and found this really great fun. Now, I'd had this, oh goodness, about 2 or 3 weeks when walking past a second-hand shop, I suddenly saw this in the window and priced at a ridiculously cheap price. Now, the shop did sell a lot of other musical instruments, but I think it was a case of they really did not know quite what this was and wanted to get rid of it quickly, so priced it down. Well, so much the better for me. So here it is. And something I very quickly learnt within, say, a day of just experimenting with this was that I was totally wrong in this idea of this not being good for beginners. I think as a beginner's instrument, this is probably better than most. It does obviously have a learning curve, but I think that curve is far less scary than picking up, say, guitar or a violin or an oboe or a trumpet or something like that. Possibly one of the reasons being that this is always in tune. When being an electronic instrument, if I command it to play middle C, it will generate the frequency for the sound of middle C, and that's it. There's no worrying about tuning up strings and things and then walking into a different room with different temperature and humidity, and your instrument goes out of tune at a different speed compared to everyone else's. It doesn't matter with this. It is an electronically generated sound, so it just kind of does what it's told, and that's rather nice. Based around saxophone fingering and sounds and things. So on the front with our keys, we have 6 round keys, and we go C, B, A, G, F, E, D, and then we can do a low C down here with your pinky. So there's a simple octave. Hang on. That's not too bad. Other keys for our sharps and flats, physically laid out in positions where your fingers would be going on a saxophone. So let's say we want B flat, we do have a biz key combination up here. Or if you want an alternative B flat, how about a G sharp? D sharp. You get the idea. I'm not going to go through every single combination. They're all here to be had reasonably simply done. Now, talking about notes and things, transposition. This comes in its sort of default setting of a concert C pitch. If you're playing with other musicians who are, say, on B flat instruments, or you got an E flat score because you're doing that sort of saxophone, not a problem with this. With a simple press of a button, a turn of the dial, and you can shift this in semitone steps across the range of an octave. So if you want to go from concert C to B flat or to E flat or to any other even slightly weird combination just to annoy people, not a problem, done in seconds. Now, one thing you will note's missing on this compared to, say, a saxophone are your palm keys up at the top here for getting those extra high E's and F sharps and things. Not a problem on this. You can do your conventional position fingering, because on the back we have these rollers where, say, on your saxophone or clarinet or whatever, you will have at the top a key just to give you up an octave. On this, we've got for your thumb, slightly awkward when holding like this, but you get the idea. Each time you move up a series of rollers, you're moving up an octave, and likewise down an octave or two. This actually gives you a 7-octave range of sounds. So we can go down from a bass sound. I don't know how well this little speaker will handle it combined with sort of a camera microphone type thing. Let's see what happens. But down at the bass level we've got, then we can start moving up the octaves. Oh, a bit piercing, but also we then go, oh, a bit much for my poor wee ears. You get the idea. The range of sounds that this can produce straight out of the box is quite considerable. As for instruments, it has something like 200 built in. Half are based on orchestral type instruments and half are purely weird and wonderful synthesized sounds. I'm going to quickly just remind myself of some of the built-in instruments. We've got all your alto sax, tenor, baritone sax and soprano sax. We've got trumpets, Harmon trumpet, cupped mute trumpet, ballad trombone, standard trombone. We've got classical oboe, French horns, clarinets, bass clarinets. Oh goodness, soft tenor sax, hard tenor sax. Let's try a hard tenor sax, see what that sounds like. Let's compare that to a soft tenor sax. Goodness. So the list goes on. Accordion, bagpipes. Let's just see what it's going to sound like. I dread to think. Oh goodness. I don't know how realistic that is for a bagpipe. Anyway, steel drums, cello, viola, violin, electric, whole range of different guitars, acoustic guitars, bass guitars, electric guitars, and so on. And then you've got a whole mass of weird and wonderful synthesized sounds to play with on this. I'm going to quickly switch myself back to an alto sax. So we kind of looked at some of our notes and things, the range of sounds, transposition, all the different sounds it can produce. What about getting the sounds out? Yes, we do have this little speaker at the bottom. It's purely designed as a monitor speaker just for a small room so you can hear what's going on. For any serious sounds, like any electronic instrument, you want to be plugging it into a proper audio sound system. Rather just the same you would with an electric guitar, really. So we've got coming out headphone socket. So you can play this in what I call silent mode. Put this headphones on so you can play this without disturbing other people in the household. So if you want to play this at 2 in the morning and not wake everyone up, not a problem. Or even in hotel rooms or on the train. Or I occasionally practice this in my local Cafe Nero with the headphones. Or in turn, if you want to make an awful noise, plug this into a proper big sound system. We've got another sound out, the same size jack as you get in your guitar systems. So you can plug this easily into your guitar amps and the like. There's also an input sound. So if you've got MP3 files on, say, your phone or a player, backing tracks, you can feed that in. That sound will then come out the wee speaker, so you can then practice along to that as backing music for your playing. This is battery operated. The lithium battery just lives down here. When the battery gets old and worn out, you can easily replace it. To recharge it, we're talking about USB, so no problems there. The battery, assuming fully charged, lasts for hours and hours and hours. And if someone was to say or suggest to me perhaps a 9 or 10 hour battery life, I could not disagree with them. Charge it through the USB, play it through the USB so you can charge and play at the same time. Also, this is a MIDI controller device, so your MIDI, you can plug this USB into your laptop, computer, whatever, including MIDI type synthesizer. So we got GarageBand and Logic Pro on the Apple system. I'm not entirely sure what's there on the Windows, but it's all to be had. I've played a little bit with the MIDI on this. I'm afraid my level of experience and things, what should we say, it's a bit beyond my pay scale at the moment for mucking around with that, but it is there to be used. One thing this is missing though is Bluetooth. The design of this is fairly old, kind of I'd about predates Bluetooth, but it's just not on this. However, this does have this, what I call this guitar compatible output. I believe you can get for guitars little wireless transmitter things that you plug into the guitar out socket, and that will give you a wireless signal to a receiver which you can then plug into your amplifiers. So I assume there is potential to be working this totally wire free. One thing, however, that could be for some people a bit of a deal killer on this, the keys. They are quite nice metal keys, but they are touch sensitive. So no movement in the key. As soon as you touch the key, it is activating whatever notes you are selecting. If I compare that to my Roland device, here we actually have proper key movement to be had and a bit of a feel to that key movement. That is not happening on this. The keys are quite nicely shaped, so there is feel to this. You're not just touching a totally flat surface. There is shape to this, which is quite nice, but you just got to take on board that compared to a conventional key, there is a different way of working this, which I know to some people they just will not like. However, and I think there's a big however to this, if say you're someone with slightly weak fingers, perhaps a little bit of arthritis, and remember things like that can happen to anyone at any age. The idea of having a musical instrument which you can just touch the keys and not having to force down and to hold, that could actually be of interest to people, because this device is quite a light device. It's an awful lot lighter than say a tenor saxophone. The mouthpiece for your breath sensor on this, you can change the settings in that in the software on this to be really very sensitive. So again, if you're perhaps a little bit asthmatic or whatever and your lungs are not as strong as you would like them to be, you can change the breath sensitivity on here so a relatively light breath will fully activate this machine. So I think there is potential for this from that side of things, more perhaps than people realise. So I think that just about covers it. I think it's an absolutely wonderful device, love it to bits. I am still practicing my scales and getting my tunes slowly sorting out. It does take a bit of time, but I'm certainly very glad I have got this compared to, say, a more conventional instrument, always in tune, and being able to plug in headphones so I can practice whenever and wherever I like. Definite big time advantages. Okay, enough. Goodbye.